Welcome to the Creative Soul Healing Podcast. Here we talk about the connection between creativity and healing, and how we are creative and how creativity helps us heal mentally, physically, and emotionally. Join us now. Hi everyone, Larissa Russell of Creative View Healing, and welcome to the Creative Soul Healing Podcast. Today I have with me Rachel Moore. Rachel is a licensed psychotherapist based in San Diego, California. She is trained in EMDR and focuses on working with creatives, including writers, artists, and musicians. So welcome, Rachel.
Thank you so much. I'm super happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited to talk to you about this because, I have some questions that I always ask, but then I want to know more because I've done EMDR myself. But let's just start with your story and your path that's brought you here. Let's start with that.
Okay, wonderful. So, where to begin? I'll start. My undergraduate degree is in creative writing, and I was very determined not to get a job at the local newspaper, even though I had a lot of journalism experience in school. And so I ended up getting a job at the local newspaper, and I grew up in Idaho, so not too far from where you are up there. I ended up having a 14-year career as a copy editor. So I would write headlines, design news pages, really fun. And my brain really was attracted to the idea of starting at 3 p.m., putting out a paper by midnight, you're done, you go home, you start over again the next day. And I found that it was a great outlet for my creativity. What I realized at a certain point was missing was the emotional component, which in life is also important to me. Even though I remember at the beginning of my career, my dad would say no, you're helping people by writing headlines and, attracting them to learn about things. I couldn't see those people though. I didn't feel it, I'd always had in the back of my mind the idea of being a therapist. I always kind of had that temperament, if you will. Various things happened, and I decided in 2010 to leave the newspaper business and go back to school for my master's degree in marriage and family therapy. And now I've been licensed since 2017, been doing EMDR since 2016, have my own private practice, and I'm super happy being my own boss and got a full practice. And I also do, I should say, I do focus on creatives, and then I'm starting actually in early February, I'm starting another Artist Way group based on the book, The Artist Way by Julia Cameron. We do 12 weeks, go through the book. Super fun. Honestly, the most fun thing I do in life. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell. Is that, and I'm in San Diego now, I should say.
Much warmer there now. So
yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just going to jump in on the Artist Way because that's a program that I also do. And what is your percentage of starters to finishers? I'm just curious.
In the group?
Yeah. Do they all finish? Do they
70%
finish?
80? Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty good.
What about you?
Yeah. I would say about 30.
Oh,
30%.
Yeah, people do drop out. Yeah.
And I've done it live and online, and
she talks about that in the book, expect the group makeup to change, I believe is how she puts it.
Yeah, exactly. But it's always great when people can actually go through the whole program. So yeah, I love that you have a great finish rate.
And I tell people that it's so much easier to do it in a group than on your own too. I met literally one human being who said they went through the book on their own, and I was like, are you sure? Really?
It's much easier. And every time you go through it, you have more insights, I think, right? Every time you go through it.
Yes. I've read the book over and over and over, and every time it feels new in different ways. Yeah, no, it's brilliant. It's so fun. It's so fun.
Oh, that's great. So before we jump into more things, I just want to ask the sort of the main question I ask everybody is, what does healing with creativity mean to you?
Wow. That's cool because that kind of leads me to think about EMDR. And I think part of the reason that I'm drawn to it is that it very much to me feels like a creative practice. I mean, we could get into the details and the technique or whatever, but really we're kind of I think in many ways leaving the logical brain out of it and seeing where the brain can make associations for healing, that the logical brain, as good as it is and is developed and smart and useful in so many ways, when it comes to healing emotional things when it comes to healing issues of survival, so I'm thinking about the back parts of the brain. When it comes to the back parts of the brain, the front part of the brain where our logic is centered, it tends to be not super helpful. And I like that EMDR is kind of like, we just kind of like can get around that and go really toward the source of healing that isn't available if we just think about our problems or if we just talk about them.
Yeah. So now we'll dive into that because a lot of people may not know what EMDR is. So
Sure.
can you tell us what that is?
Okay, here we go. EMDR stands for eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. It's so funny, all these techniques in therapy, like they all have really awkward names and acronyms, and that's just the way it is. I don't know why, it just happens that way. So essentially the idea is that when trauma happens, and trauma can be anything what we call like a big T trauma or little t trauma. So big T traumas might be things we think about like, tornadoes or avalanches or, car crashes, things like that. Little T traumas can be sort of like smaller, maybe even emotional slights that happen over a period of time, or neglect, for example. And I'm thinking specifically of with children, that can be little T trauma that maybe happens over a period of time and also can have detrimental effects. So when trauma happens, it gets stuck in the brain so that if you get triggered, if you get reminded of it, you might feel like it's still happening or it's happening again right now. You might see, hear, feel the same sensations, to have the same thoughts that you did back then. Trauma doesn't understand the passage of time because, again, it doesn't really live in the logical parts of our brain. And nobody knows how or why EMDR works. We just know that it does work. And studies have shown that it works faster than talk therapy. The theory, one of the theories, is that when you are in REM sleep, so rapid eye movement sleep, and your eyes are moving back and forth, that may be the brain's process of putting memories into order in your brain. Like, for example, I was just an example of like, what did I have for lunch today? Oh, I think I can put that into long-term storage, right? Like, I don't think it's going to be important unless there was like a cockroach in my lunch, and then that might be trauma or just something I need to address. So they think that that's what might be happening. And when we do EMDR, we stimulate the information, which means we bring up the memory. It's not like completely, though. We always have one foot in the past, one foot in the present. And you as the client are always aware. You as the client are always in control of the process. We bring up the memory. We do eye movements back and forth. And there's various ways we do that online and in person, or other types of what we call bilateral stimulation. So that can be tapping back and forth. That could be sounds back and forth. It seems to help move the material around so that you can actually digest that trauma, get rid of the stuff that's not helpful for you anymore, that's really triggering, and keep the stuff that's useful, because there are things we can learn. Kind of like I said, that weird example of the cockroach in the sandwich, right? It's like, oh, maybe I need to like clean the kitchen or whatever. Like, there's things we can learn from the trauma that are also helpful. So that's kind of my nutshell explanation of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I always thought of it as sort of keeping the conscious mind busy so the subconscious could do the work. That's how I look at it.
Because that's another theory, is that when you tax the working memory, the conscious memory, that the for whatever reason the distress of the long-term memories goes down. It's almost like they're in a war and one of them has to win, and the working memory wins.
Yeah. So I found that it just moves things through so quickly the few times that I've done it. And I think it's amazing for anybody who's dealing with trauma and needs to heal. But, check with your practitioner first before to decide for you, but it worked really well for me. So is there a creative, other than EMDR, which I think, can be, especially the way the questions work and how you start to dig in, definitely creative. But is there a creative healing modality that you use for yourself?
Well, that's a great question. I actually have just recently in the pandemic, I bought myself a digital piano because I know that for me, historically, my whole life, the one thing I can always rely on to help me feel relaxed and get into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest, as opposed to the sympathetic nervous system, which is activate, right? The one thing is sitting down at the piano. That will always calm me down, and I needed that. So that was a great investment, enjoying that. I also recently have started taking singing lessons again. And my teacher says she loves working with me because I understand all the psychological parts of what's happening. And so she doesn't have to necessarily also be a therapist with me, which is cool. I mean, some things happen in singing, though, that I do take to my own therapy, right? Because it can bring up a lot of things and bring up a lot of opportunities for healing, especially, I think, with singing, because you are the instrument. And so everything that's happening in your body, your mind, your emotions is going to come out when you try to express yourself, which is beautiful and can, lead to all sorts of discoveries. So yeah, that's how it's been working for me.
Yeah, I have to say, music or singing, because I've done singing as well. I don't want to share my singing, right? But I like to take singing classes and be a part of that. I just don't want to perform. But it brings up, because there's emotions that come up through that. And there's so many things that as you start to, especially if I'm practicing at home and I'm alone, and then everything just kind of like, you can get into the flow, if you will, much more than I can with a group. Yeah.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I'm kind of like the next step up, where I love singing with groups, but I don't necessarily want to be a soloist, Yeah, I like the group experience, but I don't want to be the one out front. Like, I'm good. It's cool.
I'll stay back here. I'll sing along.
Yeah. Support everybody. It's fine.
Yeah. Everybody has their different way, for sure.
It's
and
true.
Now, you talked about doing EMDR. I'm just going to jump back here. Sorry.
Sure.
Online. And I hadn't thought of that, because when I've done it, it's like there's a pulse in the palms, there's a sound in the ears, and then there's a lights that I'm watching.
All three.
All three.
Yeah.
So how do you do that online?
So when I used to see people in person in my office, and I'm 100% online now and have been since early 2020, when I used to see people in my office, I would actually sit in front of them and do the eye movements in front of them. So what I'm doing is I'm moving my hand back and forth, or I'd have like a stick with a ball on it and move it back and forth in front of their eyes. So I'd be kind of like right next to them doing that. And so because of that, I was convinced. I was like, there's no way that you can do EMDR therapy online. And then I was forced to do EMDR therapy online because that's what I do. And I needed to go online. And much to my happy, pleasant surprise, I found that my clients were telling me it works exactly the same. And I found that new clients who I would only know virtually were having good results too. And lo and behold, it does. It works great online. And so what I do is I use instead of using my hands or anything, I have a program that has a little ball that goes back and forth, and then I just share the screen or whatever, and they follow with their eyes on their screen, and it works great.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. Because I think, if we had to have dropped that for the last 2 years, that would have been really not great. So I'm glad that you found a way to work through that, because I think that's amazing.
Yeah, I've been feeling, my heart has been going out to, for example, therapists of any modality who work with kids and weren't able to see them in person, because man, it must be hard to keep a kid's attention on the screen, and they've got so much screen time already with school. It's just that is tough.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad you could make that work. So when you're working with clients and you're doing this EMDR, you don't have to get into specifics, but I just want to ask you, like when you start to see that sort of aha moment, or they start to come out of that, can you sort of share that aha-ness, if you will? Does that make sense?
It does. I remember going to a EMDR training once, and then we do in EMDR, again, I don't need to get too technical about it, but we also do a part called the body scan, which is like, okay, think about the memory and this positive statement that you want to have now about it, and then just scan from the top of your head down and notice if anything feels weird or uncomfortable or hurty or whatever. I went to this training and they said, okay, while the client is doing the body scan and the eye movements and stuff, you, the clinician, need to be doing a body scan. What am I noticing in my body being with this person? Maybe our mirror neurons, which is a whole other topic, or maybe our mirror neurons are jibing and I might be feeling what they're feeling. Now, I'm not saying that's always correct. I do say that I pay attention to that though. I notice that in my body. What's going on for me when I'm with this person, even in this virtual space? What do I notice is happening? Because what's happening inside me may be similar to what's happening inside them. And I'll check, because again, I may be wrong, and so I'll say like, gosh, I notice that I'm feeling more relaxed. I wonder if you feel the same way. And they may say, oh yeah. And then sometimes it is hard to explain how sometimes it's just obvious, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes we look at each other and we just kind of nod and we're like, yeah, you're there. You're there. And the cool thing about EMDR is that, like I said, we can literally have scales that the client can give their subjective assessment, okay, 0 to 10, how much is this bothering you? They say 0. And if they seem really clear about it, and it's like, well, yeah, okay, cool, cleared, great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And you say that you work with creatives, so writers, artists,
Mhm.
musicians. And is that unblocking their creative process, or is that just working through trauma so that they can release, or do they use the creative? I have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. No, I know. It's so interesting. I mean, to be honest with you, the number one reason why I like working with creatives is to save both of us a lot of time. They can come to me, they can say like, hey, I'm an artist. This is really important to me. This is my life. And I'll totally understand. I'll be like, yeah, I get it. Great, let's go.
Mhm.
Right. So that whatever it is that they're working on, it could be literally about performing, which of course, worked with people on. A lot of times it's about something different, because kind of like we were saying earlier, like when you're a singer and you are the instrument, and everything that has happened, all of your experience informs that, right? And so the topic could be anything. The topic could be a parent dying. The topic could be, a religious, spiritual abuse. The topic could be anything. And I always say this to my clients. I'm like, okay, maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. I tend to think everything's connected, everything's related. So let's just work on this area over here and see if it might not affect this area over here. And more often than not, it does.
Mhm.
So I know it's kind of a vague-ish type of answer, but yeah, I think that the working with creatives is mostly because I had an experience where I was explaining to a therapist about the piano thing. And I was like, oh my gosh, I went to my friend's house before I had my own piano. I went to my friend's house and they had a digital piano and it felt just like a real piano. And it was so exciting for me. And she's kind of like, oh, I don't understand. She didn't get it. Whereas if somebody told that to me, I'd be like, yeah, totally get it. Right. And just kind of having that, being on the same wavelength in that way, I think can be really helpful, reassuring, and like I said, just save a lot of time and confusion.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You were talking about the creatives being, easier, not easier, but like they're sort of more in tune and in touch, right? And then because it allows, I think part of being creative, it allows us to be more in touch with what's happening, because it's almost like we feel at a different level.
Sensitive. Yeah. We have different
Yeah.
sensitivities, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I find that.
Which can inform and help our creativity, and also can be hard on a personal level because we take things in so deeply. Yeah.
Mhm. And I think that's why when there's criticisms against your creative work, a lot of creatives have a difficult time with that because of that sensitivity, right? Because you've poured your heart into it, and if someone doesn't like that, yeah, absolutely. And so COVID has changed your practice because you, of course, have gone online, but has it changed your creativity at all?
Yeah, I want to sing in a choir and I haven't done that. And I miss it. Yeah, and I suppose, I could do it online, I guess. But again, I already told you how reluctant I was to do EMDR online, right? I'm like, no, I can't. It won't be the same. Maybe it would be the same. I don't know. Yeah, that is definitely. And on the other hand, or in addition, it has caused me to be more creative in my practice, at least. Right? Like I had to figure out how to do this. I had to figure out how to put my entire business online immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a real challenge, and in a lot of ways a creative challenge, because like, what do I even do? I mean, in the past couple of years, I've been in my office, then I've been at home in my living room, and now I'm back in my office, even though I'm not seeing people in person. You've had to be really flexible, which is a hallmark of creativity, right? Like super flexible with what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. And
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And it's been really interesting to watch how people have changed or not. And then that's been a problem, right? But how people have changed through the pandemic. And it's been interesting. So I just want to thank you so much for being here today. Is there anything else you'd like to add that we maybe haven't discussed yet?
Oh my gosh, I think that I just wish everybody the best, and earlier we were talking about, for example, how helpful EMDR is, and I want to extend a little compassion to folks who maybe don't feel like they're quite there yet. And I'll use a personal story for that, which I've told many people about, but I at the moment, I have an elevator phobia. Like, I don't want to go in an elevator. Now, there are reasons. I had some claustrophobia before, but then I got stuck in an elevator a couple of times and I'm like, I'm not doing it. I'm just going to go around. This going around way is totally working for me, right? And I know at a certain point in my life, before I die, probably won't work so great for me anymore going up and down stairs, right? I know I'm going to have to address it. Now is not necessarily the time. So I would say if you're going along in life and you have an issue, and maybe it'd be good if you went and got help, maybe you're working, like, just be easy with yourself. Like, you're at where you're at. Everything happens all in its good time. I really believe that. And and you'll know when you're ready to move on and address something. You'll know.
And you're never done. I just want to add that. And you're never done.
Yeah.
Every time I think, okay, there can't possibly be anything else.
Oh, I know.
Oh, yes, there can.
Right. And it's okay to do therapy for a while and take a break and go back. It's not like you have to be in therapy forever or anything like that. But yeah, there's always new understandings to reach. And that's exciting. That's what being alive is, right?
Yes, absolutely. I seem to take, a couple of year break, and I was like, oh, I need a few appointments, and then I'll take a couple of year break.
Exactly.
Just
right?
a little tweaking.
Practice, try the stuff out, right? Like, get to that plateau, see what works, see what doesn't work. Okay, it's working for a while. Okay, yeah, now I'm ready to go maybe a little deeper or whatever. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, I just want to thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It was really wonderful talking with you. I appreciate it.
To our listeners, we will see you again next time. And in the meantime, I wish for you amazingly creative days. Thank you for listening. If you found our podcast of interest, we'd love for you to leave a review wherever you listen in.